In closing here, so the first potentially useful strategy for practitioners, right, who are interested in combating misinformation, right, is to call people out, which is largely what fact checkers do, and try to increase the reputational costs of false statements. So if politicians feel that they have to pay a price when they make inaccurate statements, we can try to attack the sort of supply side of misinformation rather than focusing on what happens sort of post false statement and correcting people's misperceptions after they hold them. This is sort of the fact-checking model, but I want to emphasize that, of course, you don't have to be a sort of institutionalized fact-checking organization to do this. Tools at places like Google and Facebook and elsewhere have made efforts at flagging false claims at the point of communication. Try the same strategy, right? And the second opportunity I want to highlight is there are a lot of really highly credible sources that can combat misperceptions even when they're highly polarized along political lines. One situation in which misperceptions are often a little bit easier to correct is when you can get a partisan or ideological actor speaking against his or her own self-interest. That's often highly persuasive, right? There are lots of experiments, for instance, that show that if you can get a Republican to combat the claim that there were death panels in the Affordable Care Act, that's a much more persuasive cue than if you can get somebody who is totally in support of the Affordable Care Act, for instance, to do that. And there are lots of other examples. And finally, unexpected sources are often really highly persuasive in correcting misperceptions. So there's a neat new paper that shows that when corrective information about the human causes of global warming is provided by military organizations or defense-related entities as opposed to scientists, it's just a more surprising source, and it sort of disarms people and has a much more powerful impact. So these are just two opportunities that I wanted to flag that have sort of come up in recent research. There are certainly others, but with that, I'll turn it over to Brendan.
All right. So what I want to now is turn more specifically to the 2016 election. What DJ's done hopefully is given you an overview of why we might be especially concerned about people's vulnerability to misperceptions in the partisan age that we live in this country. So I'm going to talk specifically about the 2016 election, focusing on fake news, but you should, of course, think of that, and I'm going to say what I mean by fake news in a moment, but you should think of that as a subset of the larger problem of misinformation that DJ's been talking about. Fake news is one particular manifestation of the ways in which people's political commitments can influence what they choose to believe is true in the information they consume. But it's hardly the only one. And in some ways, its importance may be overstated, as I'll talk about. The concern that a lot of people have expressed since the election is whether people are not just living in echo chambers of opinion, but echo chambers of fact. Right? In other words, it's not just that we tend to interact both online and off with people who share our political commitments, but that we may actually be only hearing from or disproportionately hearing from people who share our same understanding of the world. Right? And that's not just from your social counterparts, but from the information you consume. Right? And that's very worrisome to people. Right? Even if we disagree about opinions about what we should do, you'd like to think that we could have a debate as a democracy based on some shared set of facts. And the fear that's come out of this election, of course, is that that's no longer the case. So I want to talk about fake news in the 2016 election in the context of that question and help you try to give you some intuition on how you might think about that problem. Okay, so this is my technical analysis of the state of factual discourse in the 2016 election, right? If it seemed terrible to you, it was terrible. We study this full time, and we agree. I mean, there's no systematic way to say how factual a political debate was over time, historically. There's no agreed upon set of standards. But I think it's fair to say a qualitative judgment is that the election was especially poor. Okay? The reason for that starts with the unprecedented level of elite misinformation that came out during this campaign. There's no way around that fact. Okay, and that, both candidates obviously said many things that were false or unsupported. One of them said it with historic frequency, and it was unprecedented his unwillingness to retract or correct the record when a misstatement was made. Okay, we'll set that aside. The question of interest for us today, though, in the second part of the talk, is what happened with fake news. So here are 5 of the most widely shared fake news stories of the 2016 campaign, according to sharing data from Facebook compiled by Craig Silverman of BuzzFeed.